The article is called "The King of Misrule and His Misruling Princes." The magician casts his spells with a magic wand, and according to legend, the most powerful magic wands are made with wood from a holly tree. Out in Hollywood, in Southern California, where I used to live, they named the place where all the movie magic is made Hollywood. It's not just one building or studio, it's the whole city working together to make magic. It's mystery and glamour and drama and life or death casting its spell on us. The world-class magicians in this city of illusions, if they're good, really good at their craft, can make us forget where we are when we enter into their world. The unimaginable is real. As the spectacle plays and draws us into their screens, all our senses are compelled to come closer, and our heart races with every explosion, and the music calms us. We can smell the perfumed hair of the Olympian beauty. She whispers her siren song softly, "Come hither." But the drum beats from the jungle and warns us of dark forces and primordial beasts lurking beyond the firelit night. And for a moment, it's all real. We can feel ourselves are there. Anything is possible. It's all possible. The holiday festivals began in Roman times. It was an entire season of magic. The great holiday festival was dedicated to the pagan god Saturn and was called the Saturnalia Holiday Festival. Accounts vary, but writers from early Rome seem to have agreed that it originally occurred on December 25th. Rome's emperors repeatedly altered their calendars, and after years of confusion, eventually settled on December 17th to 23rd for their Saturnalia festival, which encompassed the winter solstice. When they changed these calendars, by the way, because it was hard, they couldn't get the seasons quite right. It would be a day off one way or another, and so the checkpoint, the marker to restart the calendar, was the midwinter festival, so they could get planting right in the various seasons. And every time the calendars were wrong, that was the reason why they had to change these calendars, just as a little side note to keep trying to get it right. Like a wizard with his wand, the highlight of the Saturnalia Holidays Festival was the fundamental and magical transformation of society. Everything was turned upside down, inside out, and backwards. Normality was subverted, and masters served their slaves in various households, as well as whole cities. They cast lots among the lowest and most vulgar members of the community, and the winner was crowned the King of Misrule. The new king was dressed in amusing finery, and with an unholy anointing began to channel the unclean spirit of misrule. Simultaneously, the willing mob who had done the deed was divided into squads and compelled to execute his decrees. In later times, a cake was baked, and a golden bean was placed in the cake and stirred into the mix. And then when the cake came out of the oven, everybody got a slice, and whoever got the slice with the golden bean was the King of Misrule. By lots, by cakes, whatever way it was done, a person was found. Sometimes the magicians could pick who got the magic slice and would be the king of misrule. The willing mob who had done the deed was divided into squads and compelled to execute his decrees. As the coup began, he, the king of misrule, ordered that slaves take command of the offices of state, and he had the power to order anyone to do anything his whim desired. As the Lord of Fools, he commanded everyone be partakers in his drunkenness and his debauchery. The king of misrule was encouraged by all the mob around him to take any woman he desired while ordering orgies, rape, and military discipline was relaxed, and the armed guards of the state, who were normally admired by friends and feared by foes, roared around the city on their chariots with loose women in tow and acting like buffoons or worse. Parties for all was the order of the day, but in spite of all the exuberance and outward gaiety, there was always an underlying tension and apprehension. Participants were continuously aware and anxious about what the king would order next and who would fall victim to the vulgar tyrant's mocking rage or unwholesome affections. This was Misrule's chance to get back at anyone who had ever dismissed, slighted, or derided him. Whether great or small, the axiom is still true. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Near the end of the Roman Empire, the king of Misrule's reign was nearly always ended with his literal sacrifice at Saturn's altar in the presence of his misruling fools. So the unfortunate misruling scapegoat was all the more encouraged to make the most of his last days. Eat, drink, and be merry, for at the end of your reign, you die. His cult of followers spent all day, perhaps even the whole year, dreaming up sweet taunts to whisper in his ear, or shout, or should they be the hapless victim, how best to exact their opportunistic revenge. Think about that. All year long, everyone knew the festival was coming, but you didn't know who would get to be the one, who would get the bean, who would draw the short straw, and thereby become the king of misrule. If you were a slave owner, what if one of your slaves drew that lot, and then he, being in charge of the household, could order things against you? But then again, maybe he has other family members, other friends, and when his reign is over, if he's too rough on you, you could still come back at him. It was always a Mexican hat dance. Who would be the misruler and who would be the victim? The rowdy bands competed in their mischievous calamities, and each macabre decree had to be followed by something new and even more disgusting or delirious. Why? Because the real challenge, wherever foolish tyrants rule, is, as it's always been, to try and stay on the tyrant's good side so that so as not to suffer his wrath. The end of the magical festival was also its zenith, and everyone, especially the misruler, knew what certain fate awaited him as step after step higher they mounted the sacrificial ziggurat, which is the temple of Saturn. See, this is the Saturnalia festival. By the way, it is interesting that the Nazis were Saturnists. That was their religion. and who representing the Nazis today just spoke before Congress. If you were a vet from World War II, if some family member was a vet from then or lost their lives, were damaged, how would they feel knowing that the head of the Azov battalions, who love their Nazi roots, was speaking today before a joint session of Congress? Was that the misruler being put right in front of you, forced to do something, to present a certain image, a certain style before our people, make it okay? The end of the magical festival was also its zenith, and everyone, especially the misruler, knew what certain fate awaited him as step after step higher they mounted the sacrificial ziggurat. It's easy to understand why the hapless king of Misrule, lording over his fools, would want to extend the party indefinitely with that kind of finale ahead. Disorder and chaos do not put bread on the table or build homes and repair streets. Therefore, Tartarus, as it was known then, or hell, as it is known now, that place where reason does not exist, is the only natural place for Misrule's reign eternal. So with great pageantry, the king of Misrule would finally arrive at the sacrificial plateau at the end of the misruling season, and was ceremoniously presented at the appointed hour before Saturn's altar. There, in the presence of all the other pagan gods and his now solemn band of fools, the sorcerer's black magic deed was completed, either by his own hand, or if he be unwilling or unable, by another's, when the knife was put to his throat. In some places, he was put to his eternal rest on a fiery wicker bed or hung from an oaken tree, after which Misrule's fools disbanded. The party was over. The party being over and the spell seemingly broken, each of the participants harbored a hidden feeling of relief, inwardly thankful to have somehow survived to the new year. They began almost immediately the grueling process of sobering from their drunkenness and scabbing over the memories of what they had just been part of, conveniently forgetting or misremembering the details. With Misrule's reign thus ended, the process of putting things back in their place and repairing what had been damaged or destroyed began. Civility, normality, order, and decorum were soon restored as the long shadows of the darkest of nights receded. Over time, the festival became so popular among the citizenry that its celebration began to stretch from days into months, and eventually, near the end of the Roman Empire, the king of Misrule was chosen on All Hallows Eve, and then he reigned for nearly 2 months. The Roman Emperor Caligula complained that the public offices were closed for too long because of the festival, and he decreed that celebrations be limited in time, but to no avail. The people partied on, spending all year tainted with the knowledge that the season for payback by the lowest and basest among them was coming. Eventually, the celebration morphed in and mirrored what we see today during Mardi Gras. As the festival degenerated into a raucous drunken rave. Many are said to have hidden themselves and retreated from the cities each year until the festival was done. Rural dwellers and farmers feared to come within the Sodomites' walls during that season because the strong potions and the magic elixirs mixed with unfettered power incited the crowds. The festival was so widely celebrated that even the Roman soldiers serving in far-flung provinces was cast caution to the wind in the magic of the season. It was common for soldiers to dress and talk as women. The king of Misrule could order torture for inexplicable reasons, while he and his armies of fools were reported to have become very good at killing people. Darius of Durostrum was one of the early saints of the Orthodox Church. He was a handsome young Roman soldier serving in an area we now call the Balkans. On the shore of the Danube River, by lot, he was chosen as the king of Misrule. But being a Christian, he chose not to stand before his Creator, having soiled his soul in his last days in this world with drunken debauchery, lusty sin, and murder. His comrades and commander spent days encouraging him to fulfill his allotted role and command them by misrule, but he would not relent, and finally, after many days, he was beheaded for his crime. In the kingdom of God and amongst the servants of God, he was later recognized as a saint in the Orthodox Church. Rome's historians tell us that Nero in his youth was appointed to reign as the king of Misrule. Apparently, it was a role he never really fully disengaged from. Later in life, when he commanded Rome, his ambitions made him desirous to remake and reshape the city of Rome and then name it after himself. One wonders now which bankers, union leaders, tax collectors, mobsters tweaked his fancy with their profiteering delusions of a grander kingdom to come. It turns out Rome's most dangerous enemies were not hiding without the gates of the great city, but within it. After the fire, allegations of Nero's complicity were reinforced when he built a golden palace surrounded by pleasure gardens in Palatine. Near where the great fires began, in the bazaar by the circus, in his imperial madness, Nero was reported to have employed the service of co-conspirators who on a particularly windy day lit torches, which were openly thrown at strategic places by men crying out that they were acting under orders. Perhaps they had received orders, or maybe they were just opportunistic looters who sought to plunder unhampered. Yeah. The Roman historian Suetonius reported that Nero was said to have taken refuge at his private theater on Palatine Hill, and there, on a magnificent stage overlooking the flame-engulfed city below, he amused himself by playing the lyre and singing of the destruction of Troy, comparing and linking Rome's present destruction to the more ancient one. 7 days and 6 long nights, the firestorm across Rome raged. Ultimately, 3/4 of the city was consumed. We can only wonder what vainglorious illusions filled Nero's imagination as he visualized a future city of his namesake, rising like a phoenix from the ashes of Rome's destruction. Rome's historians also recount how these desperate people lining the streets and fields surrounding the burning heap despaired of life. Many would have preferred to die, having failed to save loved ones or possessions, and without even food for a day, desperate and without any idea how or where to start again. Afterwards, when rumors of the conspiracy and Nero's involvement could no longer be contained, Nero's advisors, the hidden powers who are always behind the throne in every government, suggested a scapegoat. And as Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. Using the same script that was later used after the Kristallnacht fires in Germany, the cult of dark priests pointed a bony finger toward the new sect of Christian believers. First, the Christians were compelled to identify and confess themselves as Christians. And then, a short while later, the propaganda campaign began. Nero's agents controlling the conversations around the kingdom and spicing it up. Soon the city was awash with new rumors about the dangerous beliefs of the Christians. It was all over the internet, everywhere in Rome. Everybody was tweeting about it. It was all over Facebook, all over Rome. Those Christians have dangerous beliefs. They were reported to have burned Rome. It was them. It was their agents that lit the fires at the edges of the bazaar on a windy afternoon. It was the Christians. Everybody knows it's true. It was on CNBC. It was on CBS. It was on all the news networks. It was the Christians. Everybody reported it. They burned Rome, according to the news reports, because of their hatred for humanity and civilization itself. Once the rabble was properly roused, Nero's persecutions began, and with a vengeance. The rest of the citizenry were quick to disassociate themselves from the Christians for fear that they also would suffer Nero's demonically inspired tortures. Fed to lions, crucified, or covered in pitch and oil, while lashed to stakes in Nero's pleasure garden, the Christians became living, dying torches to light the paths in the nightmares of his dark soul. From eternity's throne, it's doubtful we will see misrule judged as severely as the broader community that foolishly created and endorsed him. He, of course, could not have taken office or accomplished his deeds without the willing consent of the governed masses and the dreaded posses that executed his decrees. It was, after all, a democratic festival celebrating mob rule. Even if there be the occasional dissenter, and certainly those retreating to safer environs had voted also, either with their silence or their feet, to allow the festivals to proceed. Today, life like Hollywood seems to be caught in a tape loop. The new moves, the new movies, are just old scripts, dusted off, but with new faces from the same old dynastic acting families. And likewise, the New World Order is comprised of the old order's children, by their first and second cousin wives and paramours, as the fires beneath the great works cauldron are now lit. Beneath the great works cauldron. See, these people that want to have a global order, they call this process to bring about this new global world order, they call it the great work. They'll do that in their, meetings and things like that. So you have to understand the terms that they use. So it is their great work. As the fires beneath the great work's cauldron are now lit, our overlords are climbing the hills and mounting their stages, their magical harps and lyres in hand. These new kings and lords of misrule will soon preside and lament over the roaring ritual fires. What will be done is what has always been done in this recurring magician's act of seemingly self-immolation and miraculous resurrection. Because as they have all been taught to believe since Cain's great evil deed, only those with the will to use power can keep it. But for those of us who know their great work and the secret to the magician's trick, the magic is lost and we are not amused. Misrule's reign is merely a foil, while the plotting conspirators remain in the shadows, still plying their trade and keeping their mind-controlling, digitized portions and potions and strong drink flowing. These wizards know that Misrule and his fools have itching ears, so they keep selling the dream. The most beautiful golden city, Nero. And your names will live forever, Obama. While the music is blaring and the darlings dance for his pleasure. Meanwhile, people of conscience are torn. Do we flee the city or try to stand and reason? But is there time, and who really knows in this magical season if Misrule's lottery itself isn't fixed? After all, it is a world of illusions. And who rules the times and the seasons? Will this spell never end? The granaries are near empty, and the sowing season will soon be past. Will we now starve in the Ukraine and across the regions that rely on that grain, 1/5 of the world's grain supply? Will we now starve in Misrule's hypnotic grip, never again putting our hands to the plow? You should know the truth, and the truth should make you mad as hell. Historians someday speak just as derisively of the builders and crew of our titanic ship of state as they do now of the other unsinkable one that went before, called Rome. After all, it strains credibility that professional men who had spent their careers at sea with the solemn trust of over 2,000 souls in their care did not sense imminent danger and demand to know why in God's name was the damn ship ever allowed to leave the drawing boards, let alone the docks, without more than enough lifeboats for everyone on board? And why the hell were they racing through the darkness of a moonless night with the throttles pegged to the max and the great steamer pointed directly into the heart of a known and impenetrable field of icebergs? This titanic conspiracy to plunge the world into a third world war is no accident. But the why, only a madman can answer. Theaters of war and rumors of war. But who benefits? Who benefits if we go to war in Ukraine? Who benefits? We place our reputation and national treasure in the breach. But to what end? Is there an end? We are conscripted to follow the edicts of misrulers. They're bought and paid for fools. Somebody's bought and paid for fools, misruling over us. How did they get the bean? Who knew just exactly where the bean was in the cake when it was offered to them on the plate? Who put them in charge? Who are they really serving? But there is dread and foreboding in hearts across the world in this unnatural, unreal, and unholy holidays season. Will this mad movie never end? Or will the misrule and misrulers' fools take us all down with him? How much more can or will we take?